Welcome everyone to another episode of To The Point with Greg and Grant. This is the podcast that gets to the point, stays on point, and makes a point for the aerospace defense industry. Also in the studio is my co-host Greg Dermond.
Hello Grant. Yes, thank you. And believe it or not, this is our 10th episode of To The Point.
Yes, it is.
So thank everyone out there for all the great feedback, and keep them coming.
Alright, so today's episode is part 2 of our interview with the author of such sales books as The Ultimate Sales Manager's Guide and How to Sell Without Being a Jerk, John Klymshyn. In part 1, John shared a ton of great insights regarding how to craft effective industry emails, the impact of today's environment of consensus buying, and strategies of how to ultimately move your conversations forward. Today, John kicks things off with some tips on how to capitalize on trade show interactions. But enough of that. Let's get to the point.
So one of the things also as trying to differentiate yourself out from all the noise that's out there, which is there's a lot, as you know. One of the things we do, John, is trade shows because we're trying to get the exposure out there, right? What are some of the more effective sales strategy roles or marketing roles, BD and marketing strategies to help clear the way, if you will, for more productive engagements and conversations, especially in an environment where it's highly distracting, a lot of things going on? Is there anything you could comment about that?
Well, the timing is perfect because I just spoke at a national convention 2 weeks ago today in Las Vegas, where, of course, the rule is if it's a national convention, it has to be either in Las Vegas or in Orlando. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be the case. And it was a great opportunity for me to study and to kind of refresh my point of view about this. I think that trade shows are great opportunities to initiate a conversation. They are not where people will make buying decisions. Why? Number one, they've got 715 other booths they want to see. Mm-hmm. Number two, they are there on a mission. Everyone that shows up at a trade show has something that they want to get out of it. Whether they've been sent or they have chosen to go, they've been asked or are going to be required to get something out of it. So why don't we cut to the chase? Of course, number one, big rule is, sorry, you don't sit down in the booth. You don't do that. Number two, you're not on your phone or staring at a laptop in the booth. Mm-hmm. You need to look at your phone. You need to get on your laptop. There are plenty of common areas to go do that. When you're in the booth, you're on. It's showtime. And I don't care, there's nobody walking around. What if the one person you're hoping to meet just happens to stroll through and you're on your phone? Yeah. The body language says, I'm otherwise engaged. So that's rule number one. Rule number two, you're on your feet. Wear comfortable shoes. You're on your feet. Rule number three, you are not behind anything. If you have a podium, you're to the left of it. And when people walk by and you make eye contact, one of the great tricks and reliable tools of trade shows is, in today's world, everybody's name is in, 28-point big block letters. And 90 seconds after we hang those badges over our necks, we forget that they're there. So you're walking along and say, Greg, how's it going? You're like, how does he know me? Well, it's like you have a tattoo on your forehead, brother, but that's okay. And I'm not going to point that out to you. Greg, hey, how's the show going? Yeah, it's going okay. Okay, what are you looking for? I would rather have you think that I'm either working for the trade show or that I've memorized every booth, because invariably what happens is that people take a half a step closer to me. So what are you looking for? Or what are you hoping to get out of the show? And they, all of a sudden, a little bit of the guard comes down. Yeah. And the more they talk, the more they feel more comfortable. And there will be a percentage of people that when you're answering them, like they say, well, do you know where so-and-so is? Do you know where Boeing is, or whoever would be at your guys' trade show? As if it would be hard to find them. You say, you know that as you're answering, their eyes are going to go up and either to the right or the left to examine your booth, because they want to surreptitiously find out if your company is someone that they're interested in. And we don't know that at a trade show. All we know is this is our unhindered, unfiltered opportunity to shake hands. And when you ask, what are you looking for? How's the trade show going for you? What are you hoping to get out of it? Notice that none of those are about what I sell.
Yes.
And what happens is that people draw closer, and polite society has taught us that if someone asks me a couple of questions about me, I'm probably going to ask them a question about them. Like, so what do you guys do? Well, folks, you had better have a one-sentence, intriguing answer that you can follow with a question. We are a software provider that does blank, blank, and blank for companies that blank. How would something like this relate to what you do?
That's a great
That really
tip.
is.
Yeah.
I'm as John was talking, I was just thinking back to some of the trade shows that I've been, and when I had approached a couple of booths, the question that they asked me was, "Hey, what do you know about our product XYZ?" I'm like,
The answer is nothing, and now I want to know less.
Yeah, exactly. Not much. Have a good day.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't do software. See, what salespeople are looking for is for you to answer the question as though they've been waiting all their life for you, and this is unrealistic.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you engage people? You ask them about them and their business, or what they're doing, or where they're headed, because those are what are of interest to all of us. And when you make a statement about what you do or what your company is or what you offer, if you do not follow that statement with a question, you are leaving them out on a precipice. Well, we're a software company that does blank, blank, and blank. Well, that half a second of silence sucks the oxygen out of their lungs, their brain shuts off, and they go, oh, and they turn their left foot and they walk away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If we say, how would something like this relate to what you do? No, I'm not really sure. Okay. What exactly do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you here to see? When was the last time you came to this show?
Yeah, really opens it up
Right?
for conversation.
Yeah, always open. Why? Because I don't want anyone to feel as though I'm poking them in the chest.
Yeah.
I'm not there to sell you a used Chevrolet.
Yeah, so true. And with your questions, John, and you're certainly so talented with the types of questions, when to use and how to use those questions. And believe me, I think I've shown Grant a whole list of questions I got out of the book, How to Sell Without Being a Jerk. And it is so key that I do think, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, do you think that's a lost art in terms of the types of questions and how we use questions to engage with prospects?
Not at all. No,
customers?
I think it's something that is incredibly timely, because we live in a world of shouts. We live in a world of, I'm going to say this, post this, assert this, and run. And that's not communication, guys.
Yeah.
That's broadcasting. And, radio's been doing that for a long time. And you think about, what some social media platforms are about is very much related to the proliferation of talk radio. Because talk radio, think about it. If you've ever listened to talk radio, what do people do? They call in and they say, hey, I just want to say, and they say their statement, and then they hang up.
Yep.
They're not looking for a dialogue. But here's the thing. I mean, I'm not sure, Greg, if you guys are aware of an audiobook that I just released a couple of months ago. It's called Deeper Dialogue, Conversations That Inspire. And if you think about the relationships that mean the most to you, they're the relationships where you have had deep conversations. And you're looking forward to the next deep conversation. And the gentleman who wrote the foreword for that audiobook has a phrase. He says, if I can go deep, I can go long.
Yeah, that's so true, and you touched on the social media aspect of it, and I'm going to paraphrase a quote that I remember seeing, and it's selling social is not selling on social. There's a difference, right?
Yes.
And so you're right. I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was going to say, and a lot of times what you see is just because like you mentioned, just because you post one thing and people like it doesn't necessarily mean that's not engagement. That's not inviting conversation in. So I'm curious to get, what is your take on leveraging social media as a selling channel, and how can companies get better at it? Because I'm seeing just maybe one voice, like you said, shouting out there with a message without actually engaging what maybe they want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing. I don't think that posting is a selling activity, because selling is having people feel good about making a positive decision to move the conversation forward with me today. That's not happening. I post, and I will continue to post. Why? Because it's promotion. Mm-hmm. There's advertising, there's promotion, there's public relations, and there are sales. Now, sales is where the rubber meets the road. Sales is where I have to be eyeball to eyeball with you, even if it's virtual. I have to be in some sort of live interaction with you for you to make an emotional decision about whether or not you feel that you can trust me, or feel that you will be able to tolerate my personality through the onboarding of what I'm selling you. So I think that what we're doing is we're confusing concepts and saying, okay, well, how do I sell on social media? You don't. You promote on social media. You support your brand on social media. And then if people decide to reach out to you, now you've got what you said, Greg, and it's a fantastic word, engagement. Because engagement means two parties and going back and forth. And I'm not looking for a balance. I'm not looking for 50-50. I'm looking to make myself and what I offer invisible to the process. And I'm looking to create what I call a frictionless experience for the potential buyer. Mm-hmm. What is it that you are ultimately looking to achieve in the next 18 months? Well, we've got a lot of things about it. Okay, so let's narrow that for our conversation. How would a vendor like us get your attention? Well, I think what I really expect out of a vendor is blank, 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 and blank. Guess what? They just gave you your entire map for where you should focus your conversation. Those things that they listed out, say, okay, well, how open would you be to exploring whether or not we might be able to meet those requirements? Notice the structure of the question. It leads with curiosity. Mm-hmm. It backs it up with technique. It's about them and their future, not me and what I sell.
Right. Well, John, I just wanted to change gears slightly here. One of the things that we do on this podcast is when our guests come on, we always like to kind of get it. You know, what advice would they offer up to folks who are just coming out of college, going into the aerospace and defense industry, or those folks who are just changing industries in general? And I wanted to kind of ask you as well, given your sales and recruiting experience for the Navy, you know, what tips, suggestions do you have for folks that, you know, want to be able to sell themselves to potential employers who may not have a ton of experience in a particular industry?
Okay. Well, number one, prepare for the interview. Know as much as you can about who will be interviewing you. Number two, know something about the company and their competitors, because I've interviewed an inordinate amount of human beings, and one of my closing questions in every interview is, what questions do you have for me? If you show up in an interview and you don't have any questions, that means that you're not curious. It means that you haven't done any prep, and it means that, as far as you're concerned, our conversation's over.
Right.
So guess what? 30 seconds after you walk out, I've forgotten about you.
Yeah, it's over.
Yep.
Right? And that may sound cold, but look, you know, this is sitting at the adult table.
Yeah, it's telling.
So the first thing is prepare for the interview. Number two, dress for the job you want, not for the job you have. If you are coming from a casual, if you've done an internship at a tech company and now you want to get into the aerospace realm, dress for dress the way the executives there dress. I would rather you show up overdressed for an interview than underdressed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is, look, sounds simple, right? Well, my late father used to say, John, the problem with common sense, it's not that common.
No, it's not.
That's for sure.
It's a scarcity.
We should put it on the friggin' periodic table.
That's great. So
Another thing is, well, hang on.
Yeah.
One key thing that I think is lost in our electronic world that I will tell you, I have coached about 36 people with 15 years or more experience in interviewing processes and in finding a new role. Now, I know you're talking about someone just entering the workforce. Well, guess what? This is as important for them as for experienced people. When you are ready to leave there, get a copy of the person's business card. Get a copy of every business card you can of everyone you meet. And if they don't give you a business card, make sure you have a notepad to ask them what is the correct spelling of your name. Because before you go home, you're going to go to Papyrus or to somewhere, and you're going to buy a very simple, very elegant, very clean-looking box of thank you cards. And you're going to handwrite and address and stamp and go to the post office and mail handwritten thank you cards to every person you meet in the interview. And it's going to say, thank you for considering me. Look forward to working with you. And you sign it.
Wow,
now that could be a lost art form.
That's great advice, and yeah, it probably is a...
Yeah, I would like to see it revived.
Yeah, me too.
Well, it's up to us. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Very true. So, John, are there any tools or maybe other book readings that have really helped you on your journey to being in the field of leadership and sales management?
Well, I will tell you that after my first book came out, the one that you were kind enough to mention, Moved the Sale Forward, I found that I started moving away from my personal reading list being sales-focused or business-focused. Not because I felt I knew everything, but because I wanted to look at what we do through a different lens. And that's when my passion for language really started to kind of rekindle itself. I mean, I've had a passion for languages since I was very young. You know, we were talking before we started the recording about where I went to high school.
Yeah.
I went to high school on Long Island in New York, and we were under what's called the Regents approach to education in the secondary schools. And when I was going into junior high school, I was identified as someone with a potential talent for languages, and they gave me the choice of studying German, French, Spanish, or Russian. And I chose Russian, and I studied it for 5 years. And I didn't realize when I was doing that I was pursuing this interest. And when, again, after my first book came out, which is such a fun thing to say, I started pursuing this very different path. I wanted to know, okay, I really want people to think about the questions that they ask. I really want people to think more creatively. So I started reading about how the mind works, how language is structured, where it comes from, how it operates. And one of the most mind-blowing books I've ever read, that I have read 3 times, is a book called Proust Was a Neuroscientist. And if you have never heard of Proust, Marcel Proust was a French novelist who was obsessed with memory and how it works. And he was one of the first people to kind of describe the fact that every time we recount a memory, whether it's internally or as we're telling the story to someone, every time we revisit or recount that memory, some aspect of it changes. Now, you know, I was in the Navy, so we had what we called sea stories. You know, oh, I remember when I was over here and we did this ridiculous thing. You know, there's also fairy tales. And the difference is, you know, a sea story begins with, no, this really happened. And a fairy tale begins with once upon a time. And what he found was that every time he recounted a deep emotionally resonant memory, he would either have to check, wait a minute, did that happen, or did I hope that was part of the memory that happened? Am I now creating a new version of the memory? Am I losing my accuracy in being able to recount the memory? Now, what does this have to do with selling? Well, number one, you have to have a good memory to be in sales. Number two, the whole impetus of the book is that this researcher named Jonah Lehrer, Lehrer, he had this idea that, and he started discovering, and the more he researched, the more he found it was true, that many key scientific discoveries have been preceded by creative endeavors or creative actions. Well, Proust in the 1800s was talking about neuroscience. How does the mind store memory? How does it attach it to emotion? And how does it attach it to language? Well, guys, I don't know about you, but that fascinated me.
Yeah. Oh, that is.
And what he did was he talked about our relationship with food, our relationship with memory, our relationship with language, and he also introduced me to a guy who is now one of my personal heroes, which is a French cook named Escoffier. And Escoffier, we need to thank him every day for what he's done, because number one, first thing he did was he created something called the menu. He
I
said,
love that guy.
I do too. So what's on the menu? Let's check it out. And
that's awesome.
he also invented gravies and sauces. If you've ever had beef bourguignon, you want to thank Escoffier.
All right. I'm going to thank him now.
He found that there were more experiences than only the way food looked, because up to then, everything was about appearance. And he said, no, it's about how it smells, how it tastes, and the order in which we eat, and changed the entire world.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure, man.
Yeah.
So John, one of the things that we like to do on the podcast, because just with the conversation here, we covered just so many different topics. We always like to ask folks, because this is the podcast that gets to the point, stays on point, and makes a point. What point out of everything that we talked about today did you really want to hammer home to the audience?
Stay curious.
I like that.
Yeah, that's good.
I just had a milestone birthday, and I have this exercise that I go through twice a year, once around during the 4th of July holiday and once between Christmas and New Year's, where I sit down alone and I do some real hard thinking about the answer to the question, how do I want to spend my time? I love travel, I love red wine, I love the NFL, I love languages. So how do I want to spend my time? Well, I think I want to go watch the NFL play in a foreign country while I drink red wine. So however I can get there is going to be the result of me staying curious. Those two words have such resonance for me. As a musician, resonance is very important.
Yeah.
And as someone who speaks and teaches and coaches and writes, I mean, the first creative writing advice I ever got that has stayed with me was a creative writing professor by the name of Charles Hood. And the first night of class, he stood in front of us and said, "Great writing has resonance."
So the other question that we wanted to ask you for fun was, if you had to write another book, but it couldn't be anything about sales, professional development, leadership, or anything along those lines, what would you write about?
Being a father.
Oh.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. Since we're all fathers here.
Yep.
And if you're not a father, you don't know what it's like. And if you are a father, you have been made part of a fraternity and a fellowship and a lineage that needs to be honored, needs to be elevated, and needs to be valued. I am very passionate about the role that I've played as a father, both to my natural children and to the very close friends that they grew up with, who call me Papa K.
Papa K.
Papa K. I love that. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that, John.
Happy to do it.
Please,
you got my attention.
We appreciate that. Please, if you could, let the audience know how they can find you.
My website has my last name in it, and my last name has no vowels. I get into debates with people when they say, "Well, why is the vowel? Well, why is the vowel in a proper name and a proper noun, but a name is not a proper noun?" And you can go ahead and split the infinitive or define whether or not you want to negate the subjunctive. I don't care. But people are waiting to hear how to get in touch with me. My website is real simple, Klymshyn.com. Klym like Mary, S like Sam, HYN like Nancy.com. They can email me, john@Klymshyn.com. One of the great things that I think has been a gift about having a last name like this is, I've had to spell it for a long, long time. And I travel pretty extensively, and when I check into hotels and I say, what my name is, invariably they will say, "Are you John?" And my response is, "Do you have another Klymshyn staying here?" Because if you do, I want to meet them. So people can reach me, but I'm on LinkedIn. They can email me directly as a result, and just I'll tell you what, if they put To The Point Podcast in a subject line for the email, I will send them a free downloadable chapter of any of my 4 audiobooks. They can find me on Audible. They can also find hard copy books on Amazon. I'm the only Klymshyn that is on Amazon and Audible. So.
Oh, that's terrific.
That's awesome. Very generous.
Very generous of you. Thank you, John, for that.
I'm going to email you now.
Keep in mind, I said 1 free chapter.
Oh, all right. I thought you meant of each book.
Well, aren't you glad I clarified? So now we can manage expectations and you don't go home disappointed.
Oh, that's great. Well, John, thank you again so much for joining the show today. We are just ecstatic that you're able to join us. We appreciate your time. Appreciate your valuable insights, too, as always. And hopefully we'll maybe someday get you back on the show at another time in the future.
Yeah, this has absolutely been a pleasure, John.
I appreciate that, guys. I really do. You've made it easy.
And that wraps up part 2 of our interview with John Klymshyn, the author of several books, including a few audiobooks as well. In this part, we discussed his thoughts on trade show best practices and when and how to engage with customers and prospects, as well as appropriate questions we should all craft when prospecting or corresponding to. And then lastly, we discussed his thoughts on social media. So stay tuned for our next episode coming up, and we appreciate your listening, and please provide any feedback that you'd like to share. Thanks again.
The views expressed in this podcast are our own and not those of the companies we work for currently or previously, or of any person or organization affiliated or doing business with those companies.